about 40 minutes planned for you, half an hour, and we're going to have a panel and discuss some top issues that we're facing today. And once again, thanks all for every one of you for coming. It was certainly a grueling harvest, and I'm sure it was nice to put that to bed and for us all to be here today. Flashing up on the screen and on the door over there, and we really appreciate our sponsors. Without them, the wheat growers wouldn't exist, and we appreciate all of you too, our members. And without you, we wouldn't exist either. So, I'd like you all to stick around and until the end, and so you can win the Great Western Brewery Prize. So that should be good. My apologies, I'm Matt Sawyer. I'm your director for the Western Canadian Wheat Growers, and I just farm over there, just west of Acme, Alberta. So, before we get into it, I did mention, and feel free to take some of these stickers at Western Canadian Wheat Growers advocating for us. And I think that really hits home, because without the Western Canadian Wheat Growers, there are just little issues that we can jump into. We aren't handcuffed. We're looking out for you, our membership, and that's it. And if you look at so many of the issues that we're dealing with today, or that our governments were dealing with, or for our economy, whether it's the Kindergarten Project and how these special interest groups are allowed to infiltrate our provincial and federal governments, I think agriculture is next. And I think it's up to us as a whole group to unite, and whether it's just the different groups and be able to bring forward that message that to our local and provincial and federal governments that we have to be strong in agriculture, otherwise we're going to get walked over by these special interest groups. And case in point, we're looking at some of the crop protection products on PMRA right now that they're talking about banning. We've got glyphosate issues and how bad everything is. So I really encourage you guys to spread that message too. Spread that message to your friends that the wheat growers need your membership. Let's be strong and move this organization forward. So, and some of our members are just in Ottawa, as you see the pictures flashing on the screen, and they're fighting a good fight. And if we don't have that sponsorship, we don't get to do as many of those trips. So thanks very much. So today we will not disappoint. We have a great panel here of speakers, and we're going to have the U.S. Wheat Associates, National Association of Wheat Growers Association, and Lee McCrane, Western Canadian Wheat Growers, that's our big Gunther, and Sean Haney of Real Agriculture has agreed to moderate this panel. So without further ado, I would like to call up Sean, and he's going to take the lead from here. Sean?
I'm still laughing at that's our big Gunther. Could be worse things, Gunther. Okay, so I'm going to have the rest of the panel come up, and we'll get to. While they're doing that, I think this is going to be a really interesting discussion, because there's a lot of really important, interesting stuff happening. Just pick whatever order you want. There's a lot of interesting, important stuff happening in Canada, as Matt described. The reality is, though, there's a lot of stuff happening in the U.S. as well, and I really think through the whole NAFTA issue that we just all went through for what it felt like 10 years, for those of us that had to comment on it every day. The reality is my experience with Rural Radio 147 and on RFD TV was that there is a lot that both sides of the border can learn from each other. Okay, both of us have very, very similar opportunities. We have very, very similar issues. But really, we really do share this common bond of agriculture that is extremely, extremely genuine. So this is going to be really awesome to have people from both sides of the border to talk about some of the things that I know are big time on the minds of this group, the wheat grower membership. The other thing I will say too is, Matt alluded to it, a big pet peeve of mine is how much the general farm population does not understand and support lobbying efforts. So whether it's organizations like this or others, lobbying is a never-ending task. It is something that farmers really, really do need to become more accustomed to and support. That comes with financial dollars, a big part of it. If you look in the U.S., if you look in the crop production sector, 6 of the 7 largest lobby groups in that sector in the U.S. are sugar. Who has the most power in the U.S. in terms of lobbying? Sugar. Exactly. Correctamundo. Okay, and so there's a lot that we can learn even inside our own lobbying sector in Canada. Of course, we're not going to get a lot of support for dairy in this group, but I will say this. Powerful lobby, learn from some of the things that they do. They commit dollars to lobbying, and they are successful with it. So lobbying is critical. I'm glad Matt hit on that. Not for my ranting and raving. For those that don't know, I am Sean Haney from realagriculture.com, as well as host of Real Ag Radio every day on Rural Radio 147 on Sirius XM. So if you could, I would love you to tune in at 4:30 Eastern or 2:30 Mountain every day, or download the podcast. Gotta get that in.
Good there.
Yes, thank you. Okay, what we're gonna do is, I think we have another mic as well. Can we grab that, Matt?
Yes.
What I'm gonna have the panelists do is, some of them you already know, but introduce themselves and what they do, their organization, and very briefly what that organization does, specifically for my friends to the right. Okay, so we'll start off with Jim here on my left.
Jim Peterson, Jim Peterson, head of cereals research for Lima Grain in North America. My role is in building breeding programs both in the US and Canada, and we're producing wheat varieties that are hopefully going to make you a whole lot of money in the future. My background is really in the public sector, 26 years as a public wheat breeder, and joined Lima Grain in 2010 to help build breeding program for North America.
Hi, my name is Gunter Jochum. I farm west of Winnipeg in Manitoba. This is my second year as wheat grower director, and second year being immersed in policy, which I always thought I would never do and I would hate, and I kind of sort of still hate it. But I also, I went to Ottawa a couple of weeks ago. Didn't think much of it until I got there and we met with politicians and officials and realized how important it is. I farm wheat, oats, canola, and soybeans, and on the wheat side, wheat variety, wheat breeding, we have a problem, and so that's why we're here today, I think.
My name is Colin Waters. I'm the Executive Vice President for the Montana Wheat Barley Committee. And so the Wheat Barley Committee is the checkoff organization for Montana's grain growers. We're members of many organizations, including U.S. Wheat Associates, so that's how we got connected and invited up. So on behalf of the U.S. Wheat Associates and all the farmers in Montana, thank you so much for inviting us. It's great to be here. And honestly, I really appreciate the relationship that we have now, and I hope that in the future we're going to just continue to build on that. So, thanks.
Good afternoon. I'm Gordon Stoner. I'm an officer with NAWG, the National Association of Wheat Growers. We're the policy side. We're up on Capitol Hill. We work with members of our value chain. Plant breeders, the railroads, our input providers, trying to bring value to our member, the farmer, at the end of the day. I farm in northeast Montana. We raise durum, peas, lentils, chickpeas, flax. We've been dabbling with corn for about 7 years. Got out of the cattle business last year, so thank you.
Perfect. So, as I said, awesome panel. Gordon, I want to go off the chart here a little bit. Just as you were talking, I thought of a question. And in Canada, we have a parliamentary system, so we tend to spend the majority of our lobbying time with the government in power. That is different, I'm assuming, in Washington because of just the committee structures and, of course, just how Congress in general is run. What is it? Is that correct? How does that look? Do you lobby? Obviously, you're lobbying both Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah, any of your folks on the Hill are pretty careful to be bipartisan or nonpartisan. It doesn't matter who the party is in power. I will say the U.S. legislature, the House is based on population. California has 50 representatives or close to it. Montana has 1. based on population. So we certainly call on House members, but agriculture tends to be rural, small population. We don't have a very big voice in the House. The Senate is where we have significant impact. 2 members per state. When you get 50 million people, or Montana, just shy of 1 million. So the Senate tends to be where we can have the impact. We're in Farm Bill negotiations right now. Clearly the House has a lot of input into the Farm Bill, but if there is a real problem in the Farm Bill, the farm organizations look to the Senate to get it fixed. At least the states that have small populations. California, yes, they can swing the House. Montana, not so much.
Yeah, and Farm Bill, not to dig too deep here, but sounds like Carl Peterson, Democrat from Minnesota, plans to try to pass it still in the lame duck, although we'll all watch with extreme interest if he's able to accomplish that. Sorry for getting in the weeds. Okay, let's talk about how we fund variety development in Canada. So, and compare that to, and get some of the US perspective as well. So, farmers love yield. Now, of course, when we see that variety that is ideal for our farm, yield's critical, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff that is encompassed, characteristics of that variety that is, that kind of create the sort of full picture for what is ideal for any given farm, and every given farm is a little bit different. Jim, you've been with Lima Grain, obviously global wheat leader, lots of business in the US, recently have come to Canada. Why do you see Canada as an opportunity given some of the way our system is structured?
We came to Canada as part of a global expansion of the Lima Grain Cereals program. It really started back in 2008 with an investment in Australian grain technologies, the opening of Lima Grain cereal seeds in the US in 2010, opening of 2 programs in South America in 2012 and 2014, and then the launch of Lima Grain Cereals Research Canada in 2015. So the company is dedicated to cereal improvement globally, and using those resources globally to make a difference, to bring value to the farm. We obviously looked at Canada as a huge opportunity to continue the spring wheat development activities in the company. But more than that, with the opening of UPOV 91, the adoption in 2015, then it looks like there's an opportunity to create a revenue stream to support a business opportunity, which is also critical, obviously. So with the adoption of UPOV 91, the discussions around value capture, value creation, it created an opening where we thought we could make a difference, where we thought we could bring our germplasm, our technologies, our people to develop a product and develop the collaborations to bring that product to market. So that's why we're here.
So in Canada, variety development is really funded through a royalty on certified seed. Thank you. I was just getting technical. How does it work in the U.S., Colin? How is variety development funded in the United States?
Can I just say poorly? Can I just say poorly?
Poorly.
Yeah, I guess that's basically the, yes, ditto. Wheat breeding in the States is primarily a university function. There's a handful of private companies that are working in that area, but it's kind of, obviously the margins aren't great. It's not the best business decision to get into wheat breeding. So right now, for just kind of as an example, and what I know best is the Montana system. So the Montana checkoff provides, it's probably nearly $1 million a year to plant breeding efforts at Montana State University. And that's about a quarter of our total revenues. And that, in combination with some public money, some state money, some federal money, kind of gets all cobbled together. And then it's fundamentally, that work just happens in, say, Montana or in North Dakota or Kansas or whatever else. It's kind of a siloed type of system. So even though the plant breeders will share germplasm They're good friends. They don't necessarily collaborate really well either. So it is it's kind of it's a little bit of an inefficiency, I guess, in terms of the funding mechanism.
Let me just make a quick
Go
comment,
ahead.
because that's the case where, yes, I mean, breeding is friendly competition in wheat, which is, I hope it stays friendly. But what's changed in the industry has been public programs started to charge royalties back 8-10 years ago now, not all that long ago, actually. And so each university now is a business center in itself, whether they like to admit it or not. They are producing varieties, they are selling varieties on the basis of royalties, and competing just like a private company. So that's the other part of the change is as funding decreased from the public sources, government and state primarily, luckily the Wheat Commission would continue to step up. They had to fill in the blank somewhere.
So is it this, there's some differences in the system between the two countries about how varieties come to market, but the reality is both sides of the border, wheat breeding is underfunded?
Absolutely, and again, this is a case where, the commodities such as maize and soybeans are probably funding 10 to 20 times the R&D effort that wheat is right now. And so are we really realizing the value of our technologies in wheat development? No, not a chance. So we have to find different ways to address that if we're going to stay competitive in the industry, competitive against other crops as well.
Okay, so there's farmers in the room that are noting and saying, oh, okay, I see where this is going. You are going to make me buy certified seed every year. So I know you're thinking it. Been in the seed industry my whole life. I can see it on your faces. So let's talk to the farmer on the panel, Big Gunther, as he's known. Gunther, what do you think about this?
Well, wheat funding, I don't know. We have some varieties that are plant breeder rights protected, and then we have the public varieties. As a wheat grower, I would actually like to see varieties come to market just very similar to canola. On my farm, and I'm the exception to the rule, we buy all certified seed every year. I don't clean my own bin run seed. So to me, that part of the equation is not a big problem. A problem is, I think in wheat, we're stuck with these varieties forever, it seems. Whereas in canola, soybeans, like the shelf life of a variety is what, 4 years? And on the wheat side, you get these public varieties come out, and then that's it. And once in a blue moon, you get one that really hits a home run. In Manitoba, where I farm, in 1993, Fusarium and Headlight came in with a vengeance, and it was a real problem. And on our farm, we actually went down with our wheat acres down to 5% of the acres. And only since Brandon wheat came on board, which has very good resistance to Fusarium Headlight, have we started to ramp up our acres, wheat acres again. So how do we get better varieties coming down that pipe? I don't know the answer.
So Gordon, what is the issue? Is it the fact that we're not increasing wheat yields as much as we have seen in things like soybeans and corn? Is it a lack of dollars? From the U.S. perspective, I'm guessing the wheat varieties have the same sort of longer life cycle pattern as we've seen in Canada. Is wheat missing a champion?
Yes to all of the above. It basically boils down to economics. Farmer's going to do what returns him the most profit per acre. And today, wheat is falling behind. If you look at the U.S., 1985, the U.S. planted 85 million acres of wheat. Number one crop by acreage in the U.S. Today, we're under 50 million, behind corn and beans. Now, can we attribute it all to yield? It's part of the equation, but ultimately a farmer is planting what he raises the most, generates the best economic return. Wheat is lagged behind on a number of fronts. Yield for one, what drove soybeans, GMO, clearly glyphosate-resistant soybeans. It became an easy production method for them. And the tech providers carried a big hammer. If you tried to grow a Roundup Ready soybean without paying your royalty, the tech providers came after you. But because of those royalties, they made huge investments in breeding. Corn the same. Corn's a hybrid. Every corn farmer buys 100% of his seed virtually every year. The amount that the tech providers have been able to invest is just phenomenal. The numbers I see are about $10 of corn research to under $1 for wheat research. So it's not only yield, it's disease, it's nitrogen efficiency, water efficiency. It's driven on all fronts, but ultimately it comes to dollars in a farmer's pocket at the end of the day.
Okay, so Canada's currently undergoing, or in the process of reviewing how it does its value capture. And so with the passing of EPOB and like, what is the Ag Advancement Act? Was that what was the,
Ag growth.
What's that?
Ag growth.
Ag growth. Okay, thanks, Lauren. Appreciate that. We're currently going through this period of we're trying to figure out how do we increase the amount of funding that goes into breeding. Do you see there being answers there, or any suggestions on which path we should take between end royalty, or is it a situation where there's a front end royalty on? Lauren, you know that there's 3 options, right? 2 options. Yeah, 3. Right? There's endpoint royalty.
Endpoint royalty,
Trailing royalty.
status quo.
Status quo. Well, we've already identified status quo is not working, so maybe there are only 2. Do you have a feeling on that, Gordon, in terms of which path Canada might be more interested in taking?
Boy, I'm not.
There's dipping your toe in the water.
Yeah, a U.S. grower. I heard another interesting possibility, but it sounds like the trailing royalty is maybe picking up steam. I'm really intrigued by it. The U.S., well, wheat is grown in 44 states in the U.S., and each state sets many of its own rules. And so to set up a royalty system in the U.S., I don't know how we're going to do it. I really don't see a clear path forward. But I'm very much intrigued with what I'm hearing here. I really am. And whether that could be adopted in the U.S., if we were going to get it in place, I think we'd have to call on Congress to do it. And yeah, there would be a lot of states that you'd have to drag kicking and screaming. I don't see a clear path forward anytime soon. You agree, Colin?
Yeah. I think that the status quo, we've found that that's not really working at all, and so we're right now struggling to find funding mechanisms for the breeding programs, and I would be definitely interested to hear what what the consensus is on the Canadian side, because I don't know, maybe there is a chance that we could do something similar, but I don't know.
It's a 2-way street, learning from us too.
Yeah.
Lauren, what is the timeline on the decision?
So,
Ad hoc panel member, Lauren Hadley, please come to the floor. Before we move on to other topics. Briefly.
So the timeline on the decision is the Canadian government has announced a consultation on value creation. And there are 4 sessions planned between now and the 6th of December. And you should have received notice, and these are going on. That's the first stage of the consultation. The second stage of the consultation will be individual grower group meetings where people like Anthony Parker from the Plant Breeders' Rights Office and Carlos Dubois from AFC, or industry players from the Seed Synergy Group would attend your meeting and have in-depth discussions And our goal here is to reach common ground, hopefully by the end of March.
Thank you very much for that, Lauren. So, Jim, we've kind of covered the funding part, but there's another bit of an issue in Canada where there is some criticism thrown the way of the variety registration system. As a developer of genetics, when you compare the U.S. variety registration system, or what we want to call it, versus what we have in Canada, what are your thoughts?
Well, let's start with the U.S. is lack thereof, because we do not have a variety registration in the U.S., system in the U.S. And instead, if you want to look at it, it's really more of a peer pressure system of anything else. If you step outside the box with a variety that doesn't fit the market, that doesn't fit the quality base, you hear about it pretty quickly. And you will be crucified for making those missteps outside the industry, whether you're public or private, for that matter.
So essentially, buyer beware.
It's a buyer beware.
Okay,
Exactly.
cool.
Exactly. And you can certainly impact the impressions of your company by stepping outside of the bounds and putting something in the market that shouldn't be there. Now, of course, you compare that with the 3-year registration process in Canada. And I have to admit, my first attendance of the PGDC meeting, I walked around for 3 days with kind of a glaze on my eyes, trying to understand what was really going on.
People have been going to the meeting for 20 years and still doing the same thing.
Okay, well, so it wasn't unique in that regard. It's got some real value to it, but you also have to understand some real cost to it as well. When you delay taking something to market for 2 to 3 years that has potential to have an impact on the market. We can release a spring wheat variety in North Dakota or Montana 2 years earlier, if not 3, than we can in Canada. It slows down the whole breeding process, it slows down what we can deliver to you guys in the marketplace, and there's additional costs, of course, just through the registration system itself.
So you may have a great variety is being grown extensively in Montana, and without 3 years of testing in Canada, you can't get that variety registered here.
And 3 years of data in Canada.
So that's important too.
The other part.
We cannot move north, even though you've been doing all the testing. You probably have more than 3 years of data in the U.S. You can't bring that north.
Well, there's a tier of counties along the border that they allow data coming in, but it's limited, and of course, on what data from the U.S. is going to be provided.
So that's essentially like, one, it's slow. Gunther's been mad about this, I know it. But the reality is, it's sort of like going to junior college for 2 years, and then trying to transfer to university and realizing that none of your courses transfer. That's essentially what it's like.
It's challenging because we're trying to conduct spring wheat breeding as truly a North American operation. Because when you think about it, the border really means nothing to the wheat plant, right? And adaptation zones in spring wheat go east-west. They don't go north-south. And so we want to use as much data as we can from everywhere we're testing, from South Dakota to Saskatoon, to make our decision to make better varieties. And that's the challenge, is we want to be able to kind of erase the border, if you will, from a breeding perspective, then address the quality needs, of course, of the respective marketplaces.
Well, as a farmer on the panel, Gunther, this must not good.
No, not good, and it's really frustrating because I farm not very far from a flour mill, and they have bought pasture wheat, not hard red spring wheat, and they bought winter wheat, all to make bread flour. And yet we have this other entity in Canada that dictates quality for the various varieties. And because of that dictation of quality, we have a difference in pricing of the various varieties. So not only is it a varietal problem, it's a quality, an induced quality problem, which isn't really a problem because the flour mill buys all kinds of wheat to make their flour. But I have a government agency that says, wait a minute, that's not milling wheat, right? And so if you don't go directly to the flour mill, if you go into the elevator system, they go, well, we can't pay you a hard red spring wheat price for pasture because it's a general purpose wheat.
I know that Gordon has some thoughts on grain grading. So Gordon, this is I think very nice segue. Gunther, to move here to, there's big differences between the way that grain is graded in the US versus in Canada. It was probably the wheat issue in the NAFTA 2.0 talks, USMCA deal. There was changes, but maybe looking for more. So let's start there.
Sure, NAFTA 2.0. My wheat growing 1 mile south of the border, and I raise Canadian varieties. I've raised Kyle, Strongfield, Brigadier, Commander, all Durham varieties. I crossed that imaginary line, and it was called feed, automatically. The Grading Act said Canadian grain to receive a grade had to be grown north of the 49. That's been addressed in the USMCA. Today, US wheat can flow north to Canada and receive an official grade if it is a registered variety. So, and there are different counts out there. Somewhere 3 to 7 varieties developed south of the border are registered in Canada. So that is still a rub, that the variety registration process. I've had leaders here in Canada urging me to get involved in asking that the Canadian Gradings Act be changed. We're certainly willing to endorse such a move, but that's for Canadians to decide. The rub prior to the latest NAFTA round was that US wheat was treated differently than Canadian wheat. That's been resolved. So beyond that, I think it's for Canadian farmers, Canadian leadership, to address the Variety Registration Act, the Grading Act. I have no right to come here and say, Canada, you've got to change your Grading Act. That's not for me to say. I can be supportive and endorse whether the Western Grain Growers, Cereals Canada, if Canadian farmers believe it needs to be changed, we're certainly supportive. But let me move on a little further. Right now, if I understand Canadian grading, an inspector looks at it and it's whether it's a quad, whether it's prairie grain, whether it's whatever classification, that sets a price parameter for you, whether it's a number 1, number 2, a 5. What I'm really puzzled with, and we heard that, the flour mill is using different grades of wheat, and if you deal with the flour mill, they pay you accordingly on the value the flour mill sees in it. US works very much that way. It's specification, hard count, falling numbers, protein, a number of different stats. It's not an inspector just looking at it and saying this falls in this price category or another. But what I will suggest, that while overall I believe the Canadian farmer would see greater value for his wheat under a specification grading process, there are times you're going to take a thumping. You're going to have a problem with falling numbers, hard count, some specification that the mill's looking at, and a merchandiser is going to take 50 cents or $1 or $2, and you're not going to be very happy. But there are also rewards. And I've not dealt with the Canadian system a great deal. The inland terminal north of me from time to time, I've stopped showing my wheat and what would you offer. In the past, I've been very hesitant to deliver wheat north of the border Because if the merchandiser, if the elevator, and I disagree on what the wheat was, if he looked at it and said, I'll give you $5, and after I called it in, he said, no, you didn't deliver what I thought you delivered, said you would deliver, I'm automatically graded its fee. I don't have a third party that would independently say, no, Gordon delivered exactly what he contracted for. That's where I look to specification grading. You agree with your merchandiser on what you're going to deliver. It's incumbent on you to know what you have before you sign that contract. But then you are compensated for the value you have. And I would suggest that progressive farmers who try to raise the highest quality weeds, give that crop the inputs it needs, will be rewarded under such assessment. Because they will have higher specifications and command a premium.
It reminds me a lot of grading cattle, right? Where you have an agreement with the packing plant where you deliver a load of cattle and you are paid on the specifications of the quality of that carcass. And there are times where you're like, what do you mean we got exactly like you're saying, where it's like, those animals looked awesome. We got discount, we should have got a way bigger of a premium. And that's, you just gotta get more, it's a bit of being in a different headspace and realizing that it's a different situation than just showing up and because what's gonna happen is you're gonna end up showing up at the elevator and then being like, are you kidding me? $1 discount? That wheat looks great, right? Which is exactly where we are now. So, Colin, what do you think about on the grading side?
Well, I guess, and I'm not that familiar with the Canadian system, to be honest, but I think one of the real key kind of linchpins in the entire merchandising process in the States is the Federal Grain Inspection Service, and its licensees throughout the country. So, for example, the Montana State Department of Agriculture has a state grain lab that acts as an arbiter. So if there's ever any sort of disagreement between an elevator and the farmer, there's this third party that has no interest whatsoever, no financial interest whatsoever in the grain. Whereas the company is going to be looking to maybe shave a couple bucks off the price. And farmers wanting to boost that up. But this kind of third party system is absolutely critical, and I don't know, it's one of the things that we actually support through the checkoff too, just because it's so fundamental to the entire system.
What is the checkoff? What is the checkoff?
Oh, so the checkoff amount in Montana it's 2 cents per bushel for wheat and 3 cents per hundredweight on barley, regardless of feed or malt.
Just a couple of comments, and the checkoff varies widely. In the PNW, I believe they're assessing themselves 5% of value. So $8 wheat, they're 40 cents. And the PNW, believe me, their commissions are well funded, their research is tremendous. But getting back to the specification, I would suggest to you that your merchandisers, the people buying your wheat, they may buy it on grade, but guaranteed they sell it on spec when it leaves the shore. And they are blending wheat to within just a gnat's eyebrow of what the specification is. They want to meet the contract, but they aren't giving away any protein, any specification more than they just want to clear that bar, if you will. And I don't believe the Canadian farmer sees any reward on those areas where you are growing a premium wheat.
And supposedly that's supposed to be Canada's brand, producing consistent premium wheat, so.
No, that's just Montana.
So much for the invisible border.
Well, Sean, on Canada brand, while that's important and certain distance on the world market. However, at the end of the day, price always dictates quality. Like you can have the best quality wheat out there, but you know, a flour mill in Indonesia, if they can get U.S. or Australian wheat for $20 a ton cheaper, they'll drop that super high quality Canadian wheat like a hot potato.
No. I gotta defend Canadian wheat here.
Well,
Seriously. I mean, and this is where we gotta be a little bit careful with like throwing out a variety registration system like a baby with bathwater, okay? Because you do have a premium product in CWRS. I mean, it is well recognized around the world for its value, its consistency, and hey, we've been beat up over this on the US side for a long time because of the inconsistency of wheat quality on the US side, and we've always been pointed up here going, this is how it's done, guys. This is what it's supposed to look like. And when we walk into the millers in Japan, in Indonesia, wherever it is, these guys are nodding their head. They get beat up the same way the breeders did on those kind of trips. You have a premium product, and the variety registration system helps you get there. But you don't always know what you're sacrificing along the way, is really the question. And the intrinsic quality of that class is really important, and you may not see what you're being paid for in it, but believe me, it is important, and that's why the breeding companies, everyone else puts a whole lot of effort into wheat quality and making sure that fits, or your markets will be a whole lot worse shape than you think they are.
So you're invested in AGT. How is it compared to Australia?
Well, ACT has a huge commitment to wheat quality as well, and they do have a registration process they go through in identifying which varieties fit which market class and which geography as well. So every country does it, they do it differently, there's a different end product, but at the end of the day, that is still a hallmark of our respective commodities, is the quality we put it behind it.
Interesting. So, how, just jumping back to grading really quick, how does this having spec grading change, Jim, how the varieties are bringing to market? How if all of a sudden Canada tomorrow was spec grading, how would that change? Would that change anything?
You better define what spec means, because spec can mean test weight protein content, it can mean frame and graft stability, it can mean falling number, it can mean damaged starch off a mill, it can mean a flour yield. Those are things you don't just do off of a truck when in an elevator. And so you have to be very careful what the specification means. And yes, a buyer can spec anything they want, and it all comes at a price to them at the end of the day as well. So you have to be a little bit careful with the generics. Yes, we're going to spec it. Tell me when you spec it all.
And how often does that change? So is it right? Is it based on what the crop looks like coming off the combine, or is it predetermined earlier? Like, how do you know how to hit the window, right?
As a farmer, we all know that Mother Nature plays a large part in that. We can do everything right and still not hit where we hope to. What I would suggest when you said, how does the spec change? Oftentimes our buyers, let's take China for example, they raise a medium grade wheat, but they will buy from the US or Canada to meet the requirements their bakers have for their mills, for their flour. So what they buy from year to year from Canada or the US may vary some based on what they already have in country. If they've got really poor quality, then they either have to buy more or much higher quality US or Canadian wheat to get their flour up. So it's a bit of a moving target, but well, what they're looking for here is a bit of a moving target. The mills, the bakers, they want a consistent product from day to day, month to month, year to year. And the mills strive very hard, sourcing wheat from different areas, different specs, to get that overall average blend.
And I might add, you know, from a farmer perspective, you do have kind of like there's a protein target that Montana, there is a protein scale, which is very different from even the Central Plains, like in Kansas, where farmers will just deliver everything to the elevator and you pick your check. That's it. So
Easy life.
yeah, right. So for Gordon's, well, I guess in the Durham world, you do manage for a protein level and a yield assumption built into that, and then the market is kind of based on 12% is kind of the standard for winter wheat.
Gunther, how different is that than what we already have? Because it seems like the same kind of discussion. We're trying to get a certain premium. We know there's differences, but is it that different?
No.
I hear wrong.
No comment. No. You see, and there we go. Earlier at lunch, you told me how little the average farmer knows. Here I sit, like an average farmer. I know very little about all this, and it's frustrating. But at the same time, last year we were flush in Manitoba with low protein wheat. This year we're flush with high protein wheat, and so the standard is 13.5% protein. I have 15% protein wheat, and my local elevators say, well, anything above 13.5, we'll give you 1%. What was it? It was pitiful. Yet on the way down, it's twice as much. What they take off. So it's a moving target, and it's frustrating.
So, I can relate the beef example too, because this reminds me so much of the grading of cattle. One of the criticisms of some of the grids that some packers would use on both sides of the border is that at the end of the day, you end up at the exact same point. There was just different times where you were better or you were worse, and so it's no matter which system you have, it's as growers we want to get the most money for our product no matter which system we have, and when sometimes we don't hold all the power, which is really frustrating. Yeah, so we've developed a variety, we've grown it, we've brought it to the market, we've had it graded, but now there's the next bone of frustration for a lot of this room at different times is transportation. Don't need to go back through the grain backlog issues of last winter with this group, very, very familiar with those issues. Worked very, very diligently. I remember Daryl going to Ottawa as one example, did a really, really good job. There's definitely differences in the amount of investment by the railways between Canada and the US. Love to hear the US discussion around how much money, just give us a context on it.
I guess I'm most familiar with Burlington Road and Santa Fe just because they are the primary rail operator in Montana. I guess in the last few years they've been pretty vocal about their investments, and it's something like last year was probably a low point at about $2 billion. But it was up to, I think, $6, maybe even $8 billion not that long ago. And so in Montana, we've seen double tracking. There's talk about building a new bridge. We discussed at Sandpoint, Idaho, which is a real bottleneck. So there is a drive for that company to it's all about maximizing profitability for the shareholders, Mr. Buffett, and they know that making these investments over time will basically make them more profitable over time, and that's been in the period of time that Berkshire Hathaway has owned Burlington Northern, their profitability has increased incredibly. So it's clearly important to maintain and expand the infrastructure. I think that we've seen, at least from the farm side, that service has been improved somewhat.
because, I think we've talked a lot on this panel about, maybe is there a desire would be beneficial to Canadian producers to remove some of the government bureaucracy out of the value, or the supply chain or the value chain. In Canada's case, we also have a cap on the revenue the railways, or the price the railways can charge. So, Gordon, based on where your farm is, you are kind of, I don't mean this disparagingly, you're kind of in the middle of nowhere. You've got high freight rates. And so, when you look north of the border and you see that, farmers, there's a difference in the freight rates that you're paying versus what farmers north of you are paying. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. From northeast Montana, no matter what direction I go, it's a long ways to a market. And I mentioned earlier, there have been times the inland terminals of Saskatchewan had higher prices. Part of it was freight. It's a little hard to get the CN and Canadian CP freight rates. They keep those pretty close, but enough Pokemon product you can find, and we pay higher rates on BN. But what I can say is, in the last number of years, BN service has been very good. Now, the winter 2 years ago, when Canada came to a stop, there was just nothing was moving. The BN had tremendous problems too, but they threw a lot of money at it. I'll digress just a minute, and you might take away a grain from it. We spent a lot of years throwing rocks at the BNSF, and they threw them back. We ended up at the end of the day bloody and bruised. We didn't like each other. Why would somebody, namely the railroad, do anything for the farmer if they didn't like him? Probably about 10 years ago, we started an initiative with BNSF. I wish I could take credit for it. But we began a dialogue to better understand their problems, to help the BN understand our problems. And a bit more of a digression. 20, 30 years ago, farmers got together and sued the BNSF. We said we were captive shippers, that they were extracting blood from us just because they could, that we couldn't go anywhere else. If you Google it, McCarty Farms versus BNSF. When we opened up this dialogue with BN, we had been talking for a number of months. I said, there's something you might find interesting. McCarty Farms versus BN, and they all immediately knew McCarty Farms. That's my uncle. He went to his grave thinking his nephew had lost his mind, quite honestly. The BN was somebody, that was the enemy. But we've made great strides. We went for 5 to 7 years with no freight increases in Montana. If you evaluate it, yes, we were paying a disproportionate rate compared to the rest of the nation because we were captive shippers. But opening that dialogue, helping management see the unique issues of Montana. We have very stable rates, and that dialogue continues today. So I would urge you, we've tried with Canadian Pacific, because they serve some areas. Their management has a little different approach, but I would urge you, get to know your railroad. Build that dialogue, build that trust, understand their problems. Help the railroad understand yours. Because you're partners, whether you like it or not, it's not an equal partnership. But you cannot farm here on the plains without the railroad. You just can't truck your product far enough. In Montana, if we had to eat the wheat we raise, and we're about 1 million people, we have to eat about 400 loaves of bread per day, every man, woman, and child.
a lot of cars, of course. That may be too much for this group.
But one thing that I might add is, in the late 70s, I guess kind of mid 70s, the railroads in the United States were in a really, really tough spot. There's just no money being made. I think you could say probably over-regulated. So then I think it was 1979, 1980, there was this big deregulation push, and the consolidation of the railroads started taking place. So it seems to me that, obviously that was a bad situation, but perhaps the pendulum's kind of swung back a little bit too far, because in a place like Montana where there's basically a monopoly, it's a monopsony, I suppose is the way you can look at it, but it is that type of power, that type of market power does come with some regulation. And Warren Buffett is famous for saying that he likes these businesses that have moats around them, regulatory moats. So there's bits like utilities and things like that they're pretty heavily invested in. And it's because of this, it's this recognition that it isn't a free market. And that's why this is such a profitable business to be in right now. So I think that there's it's definitely one of those, be careful what you ask for, because you might just get it. If there's a total deregulation, things could improve, but it's all kind of devils in the details type of thing.
Well, we're learning here, Gunther. This is interesting because in Canada, in Western Canada right now, there is I hear it from my audience all the time. I talk to groups like this one. I talk to some commissions. They complain about the railways and the crappy job they're doing. I interview the railways, and they brag about the good job they're doing. And CNCP are off to a good start, but even in the worst of times, they will tell you that they're doing the best they can. I hear it from groups like this, or from the grain company saying, "I can't believe you let the railways get away with that comment. Here's what's really happening." I interview the grain companies, and I hear from the farmers and then the railways about how they're not telling the truth. There's a very adversarial relationship. Are we not being collaborative enough between the farmers, the grain companies, and the railways, in your opinion?
Maybe in the past we haven't been, but I really believe since last winter we've made huge strides in actually talking to each other. And seriously, I'll get.
Sounds like the U.S. and China. We're talking. Things are good. Don't worry.
Oh, let me tell you what happened about in September, right? I heard I'm a little bit sort of active on Twitter, and I heard from some farmers in Manitoba that, and across the prairies, that movement was kind of crappy. Elevators were full, especially in Manitoba. Harvest was off to a great start. Terminals filled up, elevators filled up, and the trains weren't coming fast enough. So I heard from farmers saying, you know what, the elevator is full, they're not getting cars, this is complete garbage. So I tweeted that.
I remember that.
And then I got a phone call from CN.
Really?
Yeah, I did, seriously. They said, hey, what's going on? Because this is what we're doing. We have not canceled any car spots and so on. And I said, okay, let me check. So I called all the elevators around my area, and every single one of them said, no, movement has been great, it's really good. But harvest was so fast in Manitoba that they actually filled up. So I called them back and I said, well, I apologize, I tweeted that out, and they said, no problem. We just want to know if there's a problem, give us a call right away. So I think the dialogue is happening. It's there. It was productive. It was good.
So I remember that tweet. This is the point where I'll thank you for sending me a wild goose chase too, because I saw that tweet and I made those same phone calls to grain companies and the railways, wondering what was going on. So I appreciate that.
I did tweet how movement was actually good after that, and you forgot to read that one.
Sorry.
So, okay, so as the farmer on the panel, I'll pick on you. Should Canada do away with our revenue our revenue cap on freight?
Okay, yes and no. So in other words, I think it needs to be revisited. Throwing it away, I think, is we would have short-term gain, like you said, but then we're competing with oil, any other bulk commodity that they transport, and it becomes a pure competition, and rail freight rates could run away.
But has that been the experience in the U.S.? Because grain is competing with petroleum in the U.S. too. Has that been the same? Has that happened?
We've specifically chatted with the railroad about that. And there are those that would clamor, we want everybody treated equal. And like you say, careful what you ask for. The railroad specifically prices by area. If we were paying what some of our competitors pay, when I say competitors, intermodal freight, the containers, oil, general merchandise, life would not be much fun. At least with BNSF. They specifically look at the areas. And they want to capture value. They look at market price. When wheat is up, they suggest they should be able to take a freight increase. I might digress just a moment. You've mentioned the phone call from the railroad. I've told you the story of how we opened the dialogue. I'm in DC. I'm at Senator Baucus's office, who at the time was chairman of Senate Finance, one of the most powerful committees, my senator. And he said, you know, there's somebody I want you to meet. And now the name's going to, he called out Matt Rose, then president of BNSF. What Senator Baucus thought he was going to see was a cat fight. That we were going to berate Matt Rose, complain about freight rates, complain. What he saw was myself and the rest of the delegation saying thank you for sending the Vice President for Ag Products to Montana, that we had opened up great dialogue, we were making great progress. What do you think that was worth to the railroad? Just like your tweet where you said stuff is, the railroad places value in those intangibles. That's why I encourage you to open the dialogue. Understand their problems, but bring them to the farm. The railroad did not understand Montana. We have the Golden Triangle, raises winter wheat. We've got Northeast Montana, raises durum. And then we've got the Vaughn, Yellowstone, Missouri River, the Gallup. 3 different markets, 3 different sets of needs. The railroad hadn't understood that. They need to understand Canada as well.
In defense of the railways too, from a media perspective, I see a major change in the last 5 years between, that before they would never even return a call, they would never answer a question. Now they're calling us all the time saying, hey, want to pass on some information. More so even when they're doing really well, like they did this past month. But
back to the revenue cap. I think there's a bit of a problem with it because it's very restrictive at the moment. So if we have a banner year in Western Canada, lots of grain to haul, then that revenue cap really, once you hit that, the brakes are put on because they can penalize anything that they ship and deliver above that. So when you say, let's do away with it, well, I don't necessarily agree with that. It needs to be revisited, and we need to re-examine how we utilize the revenue cap.
One thing that might be of interest, talking about the revenue cap. So in the Plains states, there's competition amongst the ag products. So for example, over the last couple of years, it's been cheaper to haul corn from I don't know, Nebraska to the Gulf than wheat from the same location. So basically, the railroad set their rate because they knew that they could extract more out of wheat shipments, or alternatively, they just wanted to move more corn. And so on some level, the middleman made a market or destroyed a market, whichever way you look at it, because they encouraged more corn production in one area and over another one, over a weekend. So it's this really interesting dynamic that there's somebody who's involved, very, very instrumental in the whole system, but they're not a buyer, they're not a seller, they don't really produce anything, but they have an incredible amount of power. So I guess to the point of, just throwing everything away, I think it's definitely looking at things and trying to make it work the best it can for everything.
All very good points. Okay, we're going to open up the floor to questions. I'm going to start off by asking Jim actually a question that didn't come up. There's been a period of time, Jim, where the solution for wheat was always mentioned to be, it's hybrid wheat. Because we heard about how corn is a hybrid, that's one of the things that launched into success, and with hybridization comes dollars. It's not that simple for wheat.
No, it's never that simple for wheat. And if you look at the opportunities for wheat to capture value, there are patented traits out there that are huge opportunities as well. And with a shorter timeline to market, a significant opportunity to manage grain and seed stocks as well. And so we're looking at patented traits as a huge opportunity. We've got 2 traits in the U.S. right now that we are commercializing. One is a new herbicide resistance trait, a Group 1 herbicide. It's a coaxium production system in collaboration with Colorado State University and the Alba Chemical Company. The other one is a nutritional trait. It's a high amylose trait or a resistant starch trait that we're really excited about. It's an opportunity to bring a higher dietary fiber product to market. Both of those are going to produce a unique opportunity in a very development step to capture value and bring more value to the farm as well. It is about bringing choice and value to the marketplace, and those are 2 other options. Not only hybrids, we're all looking at all opportunities we can to bring value to the wheat market.
The U.S. has plant patents.
Yes.
How does that system work? How does that work? Because we don't have that in Canada, correct? We don't? We don't. We do? No, we don't have PVP.
Oh, PVP versus PBR are
Yeah.
essentially the same thing.
Oh, okay.
Plant patents are a different story. So our PVP laws would be similar to your plant breeders' rights laws. Patented traits are a different story, just like Roundup Ready soybean, for example. So that differentiates.
Questions for anybody? There must be questions. Okay, Matt. I'd like to introduce everybody to Matt. He is the father of Emmett Sawyer, who is the CYSA National Senior Speaking Champion. Matt. Thank you. I'll use a bunch of
I was wondering about what your thoughts are on a pay-for-performance model of wheat funding, as well as the idea of, I think that I've heard it before, that maybe if we went to a complete hybrid system for wheat, could our system keep up? But wouldn't it be a fantastic thing to have a salt-tolerant wheat / flood-tolerant wheat? I'd go for that.
You had a model that I'm not familiar with, and I'm going to be very, very honest with you. I mean, from Lima Grain Cereals Research Canada side, we've made a point that you guys know this market and this country better than we do. It's not our choice on how you put a value capture system or a value creation system together. It's just our pleading to have you do it. And that's where Lauren comes in, because he knows the industry, he knows the business, he knows the legalese behind it, and we're just entirely supportive of the process going forward and encouraging you all to make a decision and put it in place. We're going to bring value to the market, just like other programs are going to bring value to the market, and then there's an opportunity to sort out the value on the farm that way. So, maybe Lauren want to comment, but our standpoint is not, our stance is not necessarily what's best. I understand the trailer royalty system is generating more, I guess, more support, which would be great, but it's not our choice.
If you look at what's happened in Pulses, where there's no royalty, what happened when that happened? Everybody else left. Or we essentially have one pulse breeder for or one breeding institution for that crop for the entire 3 prairie provinces. All the commercials vacated. So all the European companies, they're all gone, right? That doesn't sound very good for competition.
Yeah, just be careful what you ask for.
Right. Questions? Oh. Hey, how are you doing? It's like old friend week.
Thanks, Sean. A couple of questions at the end of a few comments. About 15 years ago, I became very concerned about the profitability of wheat. And so I took a slide and I drew a box, and then I drew slices off each side of the box that represented impairments to the profitability of wheat. On the one side, I drew marketing. That's an impairment to the profitability of wheat. And if you think back to the period before August 1st of 2012, we had an issue there. I took it upon myself to help on that cause, and I think we solved that one. Talking about Canadian board. On the other side, I drew a box called classes and quality, wheat classes and quality, because I saw that as being a restriction in the Canadian system that I didn't see in other systems in the world, and specifically the classes of wheat, the segmentation of the classes, things like KVD, and thanks to organizations like this one, KVD is not here anymore. Serious restriction to plant breeders. Had a plant breeder say they threw out 30% of their material every year because of KVD. Big barrier. So I think we've got work to do there yet, and some of that was identified in the classes. And the move that the Grain Commission made last year, the year before, and some of it previous to that, of reclassifying a whole bunch of Canadian wheats was a trump card placed on a variety registration system. It was a government entity saying, thou shalt do this, meet these classes. And it doesn't sit right with me, I don't know what the right answer is, but it's an issue. The second one was the overall variety registration system, what we live with, how it works. And I spent 15 years going to those meetings, attempting to influence some change within that organization. I think it still has very serious governance issues. I think it does a reasonable job in terms of getting quality varieties to the market. Again, an issue to work on. Funding, UBOG 91, wheat growers, significant member of moving that UBOG 91 forward. Now we've got the regulations to develop and structure to put in place, work towards a business case system for developing wheat by various institutions. So 2 questions out of this though. What was the other box that I drew the side of that? So I drew marketing, I drew classes on the one side, I drew the genetic variety registration system on the other one. What was the third? What was the fourth side that I drew? It was technology.
Technology, absolutely.
So the question is this: we have self-limited as an industry by choice to not go down the GM trail. Is that a restriction we want to hold and keep on wheat relative to corn, soybeans, canola, other crops on the farm? That's a question for the panel. I don't know.
I'm gonna try that one first, and entire career and given up. I have finally had to admit defeat in spite of my time over the years trying to promote GM wheat as an opportunity. Until the Japanese Food Agency waves their wand and says, we will take GM wheat, I don't see it being commercialized anywhere in the world. Certainly, and the Europeans are not going to go there either. However, there are other issues around technology that we've got to deal with, and if we're going to handcuff ourselves now, you're going to regret it longer. And that's around gene editing technology, the CRISPR technologies, all these things that can do a whole lot of huge opportunities in managing and manipulating traits for the future with a very different approach to technology is a huge opportunity for us. And the Europeans have already said they're going to consider that GM. The US has said they will not, and I would encourage you to say they're not as well, because we're going to be the opportunity to commercialize those, and again, it's going to be a huge opportunity. The thing you need to think about in Canada, however, is your Plant Novel Trade Act. And we're taking 2 key traits to market in the US now that I can't even grow a research plot in Canada today. We have a high and low sweet variety that you've had high and low maize for decades. You've had high and low barley for decades. This is considered novel in Canada, and I can't bring it up here right now, in spite of the fact that it's a similar trait to other crops. Herbicide resistance trait, I was told politely, well, figure it'll be about 3 to 4 years before you can bring that here with all of the work that you need to do in Canada and Canadian data you have to do to support the release. I'm not sure I can afford to. We're not in Monsanto and Bayer. I don't have regulatory dollars to support those actions. So when you think about novel traits, think about, yes, how they're developed, and then the restrictions.
And just think about that. That's legal grain saying that it's too expensive to do that. Just imagine smaller players that may have opportunities to bring to the Canadian market.
I might follow up. It was 2004 that Monsanto walked away from Roundup Ready wheat. And that was after NOG and US Wheat said we can't support you. That was a decision not lightly taken, but Japan said, you raise it, we won't buy it. So our customers stated very clearly, and as I recall, Monsanto took like $100 million buyout on that deal. And it was a while before Monsanto would even chat with us. The bulk of the growers, we would love to have whatever technology, GMO, gene editing, but we also have to be cognizant of our buyers. 50% of US wheat goes beyond our borders. Canada's got to be higher. I don't know the number. 75, 80%, I'm guessing. So you have to respect your buyers too. Now, in anticipation of the possibility of technology in wheat, we launched an initiative. The US, Canada, and Australia signed a joint biotechnology statement. It said if and when biotech was commercialized, we would all introduce it simultaneously. The thought behind that was, if we said we were all going to introduce it, and then one withdrew right at the last, he would have on-fair market competitiveness to go to, say, Japan. So if GMO does come, I hope we will see it one day. The 3 countries, large exporting countries, and now I guess we have to consider Russia. They've become the largest exporter in the world. If GMO comes, I believe we have to agree to all introduce and commercialize simultaneously.
Yeah, technology and trade approvals in places like Japan, even China. China's been dragging their feet, it feels like forever, on our 3 canola traits that we're still waiting to be approved. That more and more people they're not sure if they're ever going to get approved. Now, that's not exactly what those companies are saying, but it's not looking very good. Gary?
I could probably.
Should we let Gary ask a question? Should we have a plebiscite or vote on that?
Be prepared to sit down and. Okay, I farmed down
Gary Stanford. I farm down close to Montana, 30 miles from Montana. And we grow durum. And in Canada here, we're having our troubles with Italian, buying our durum. And it's hurting our price really bad. And I looked at your guys' grain prices in Montana, and I think you're getting the brunt of it too. And so I just wondered what NOG and Montana Wheat Associates are doing to help work on those trade issues.
So, I was actually hoping that would come up, so thanks, Gary. So, I've gotten a couple very, very angry phone calls in the last probably few months about that issue, because, yeah, there's the U.S. is now kind of the outlet for Canadian durum. So it's really depressed prices, and there's a couple people that have even brought up should we be imposing some sort of anti-dumping duties? Yeah.
There you go with that municipal border goal.
Exactly. But it's, I certainly don't think, personally, and I think I can speak for my board, that we don't want to do that. We hope that in the next year things will get sorted out, and maybe Italians will come around. Maybe, I have no idea. But I have a feeling in the next year there's just going to be a stark contrast in the number of durum acres that get planted. And Gordon, your durum grower, what do you think?
Couple things. Certainly Europe is very glyphosate sensitive, and I fear we may lose glyphosate. I don't know what's driving it. Italy in particular, Farmers Union and some of their organic farmers are driving the glyphosate issue in Italy. Because if Italy isn't importing our wheat, their domestic prices are going up because they don't grow enough of it. And they've also instituted country of origin labeling. Basically, their packaging is saying whether it's Italian raised durum or not. But this opens up a whole nother avenue. Desert durum growing in Arizona, California, absolutely no glyphosate in the production system. They're detecting glyphosate in desert durum. Very low levels, 2 to 5 parts per billion. But if you've got a crop that has no glyphosate in the system, and they still detect it, 0 is becoming such a small number. Beyond that, it's either this week or next week, probably next week. U.S. bakers and millers are having a conflab in Kansas City, if I recall. The bakers are pushing for 0 glyphosate. I spoke with them last week. I said, be careful what you ask for, because you cannot deliver 0 glyphosate. With corn and soybeans being grown, desert durum has glyphosate in it. You are making a promise to the public you can't honor. And that is going to be disastrous. Because if they come out and say it's glyphosate free, and then the activist groups buy a loaf of bread off the shelf, they're going to find glyphosate, guaranteed. The baking industry is going to take a huge hit, and we suffer because of it. I don't know if we lose glyphosate, one of the most benign crop protectants we use, what's next on the list? I know personally the next one I'm going to lose is gramoxone that I desiccate my lentils with. India's up in arms. Here in Canada, and I never get the product right, Rexon? No,
Regular. Yeah, regular.
I can't get that through in the U.S. The U.S. won't label it for us. If I can get that, then I can survive to another day. But without Reglone, and if I use gramoxone, I don't know what I do. Well, maybe you'll celebrate up here. One less yang growing levels, but they're making it very hard to farm.
But it's interesting, at Agri-Technica a year ago, you can see how all the machinery manufacturers, they're moving past glyphosate, right? They know it's coming. It's not a question of if, it's when. Germany, I think, is now 2024 is their loose year of the banning of glyphosate. And so what we saw is all this cultivation equipment that was like not just inter-row, but inter-plant, and trying to figure out mechanical ways to remove weeds in crop. And when you talk to a lot of those manufacturers, it's like, why are you going this way? It's 100% to do with we can't use glyphosate. So it's kind of a scary situation. We have time for one short question. One left. Who wants to take it? Okay, Stephen.
You're challenging Gunther on the variety registration. I'll make a comment and you could maybe respond to it. Do we, like with wheat more days, do we sacrifice 80% of the industry with spec grading to appease 20%, or I don't know what the number is that Japan buys, and the high quality dirt that they want a certificate from CGC on? Do we give up spec grading entirely for that 10 or 15%? And which is decreasing because people aren't caring about quality much anymore.
Well, I think that is part of the challenge, is trying to understand where are the value points in the industry. And you know that you don't need to export 80% CWRS in the marketplace because it's probably not appreciated at that rate. And that's why I think the expectation of CPS was going to be a companion class that would give you an opportunity to raise some higher yields, a little different quality spectrum, and maintain the integrity of CWRS, right? Well, so far, the market demand and opportunity for CPS hasn't happened. We're still hoping it does. We think we've got some really nice high yield varieties to make a difference in that class and hopefully kick it off. And then you'll start to find a balance where is the desire for CWRS in the international marketplace, and then how do you best satisfy that for the level of production you have without sacrificing then yields or economics or other things on the farm. And I just don't think we know where that balance is yet.
Oh, go ahead, Colin. Yeah, for sure.
So the one thing that I might mention is that I don't know that the Japanese would really flinch. They buy a lot of U.S. spring cube, right? And so they deal with the a little bit more volatility. They complain about it, but they still buy it. They still pay. So I don't know that you'd necessarily be losing all that much. You'll basically just be you'll be hearing about it.
I tend to agree with you. That's why
There's so much you can protect and how much don't you? It's hard to know.
This has been a lot of fun. The time has gone by extremely fast. So I want to thank everybody for your attention. I want to greatly thank the panelists here, some traveling quite far to get here. Well, actually, everybody kind of traveled from quite a ways to get here. So let's give the panel a big round of applause. And keep up the good work. There is lots of issues to deal with, to discuss, and very much it's great that everybody came here today to participate in a discussion around some really, really critical issues that we're going to be continuing to deal with going forward, not just in Canada, but it's great to also learn the U.S. perspective, and as we learned, similar issues, challenges, and opportunities. So they have their own problems, Jim says. So thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to hand it back to Matt. Sit down, don't go anywhere.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Sean. Thank you, everybody. I should get the directors to stand.